North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We report the news here honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's not news. Commentary is opinion, both yours and mine. And we debate that opinion, those opinions. It's news, analysis, commentary, and debate on the Wells Report. Like many Americans, I spent some time yesterday watching the testimony of military leaders trying to explain Abbey-gate. Those leaders saw fit to essentially, in what they called honest and open testimony, lay the blame of Abbey-gate against the State Department and the Biden administration, specifically the decision-making of Joe Biden. Here is a report on that testimony, and you'll note that I'm a bit somber, and you're going to find out why here in just a couple of minutes. It's not this. This is not the testimony that... Oh, shoot. Great. Anyway, this is not the testimony that has got me very upset today. The testimony that got me very, very upset today was from a Marine sniper who recounted the story of how he had the suicide bomber that would take the lives of hundreds of people, including 13 United States military members, in his sights, asking for permission to shoot and not receiving that permission. I'm going to play you his entire testimony. And then I'm going to play you the testimony of Lieutenant Colonel David Scott Mann, who was the commander on the ground. And it's tough. And I'm going to start with the generals and try to explain just exactly what all that means. But it's not going to be easy. There were obviously command failures, and those command failures indeed cost the lives of a lot of American soldiers. Too many. It was horrific. It was terrible. And I want you to see this report. Hopefully it'll work this time. From ABC News. Check this out as we start our broadcast on Wednesday morning here on the Wells Report.
At the end of 20 years, we, the military, helped build an army, a state, but we could not forge a nation.
General Mark Milley, who served as the top military advisor for both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, testified on Tuesday about the Afghanistan withdrawal he oversaw.
The enemy occupied Kabul, the overthrow of the government occurred, and the military we supported for 2 decades faded away. That is a strategic failure.
Milley, who served as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2019 to 2023, was joined by another top general, Kenneth McKenzie, as they testified in front of a Republican-led committee. Many GOP lawmakers have blasted Biden for his handling of the withdrawal.
Taliban wants to make a deal.
Although the initial deal to remove troops was agreed to by former President Donald Trump, Republicans say that Biden was too slow to get Americans and their allies out. All this contributing to chaotic scenes, including at the Kabul airport, where Afghani allies desperately tried to get out of the country as the Taliban closed in. On August 27th, 2 weeks after the city fell to the Taliban, a suicide bombing killed more than 180 people just outside the airport, including 13 U.S. soldiers. In the hearing room on Tuesday, some relatives of those killed gathered to watch the testimony.
I was concerned by the middle of July.
The two military leaders were critical of the State Department, saying it should have acted more quickly to get their diplomats and allies out of the country.
If there is culpability in this attack, it lies in policy decisions that created the environment of August 2021 in Kabul.
On 14 August, the non-combatant evacuation operation decision was made by the Department of State. It is my assessment that that decision came too late.
Now, President Biden didn't respond directly to this hearing, but a spokesman at the National Security Council over at the White House said that President Biden had a difficult decision, but ultimately did the right thing, ending 20 years of war and avoiding sending another generation of troops to Afghanistan.
Spectrum News, Evan Kozlov, great report. Well done. And that pretty much frames the circumstance that we find ourselves in today. But that's not the whole story. It's not even close to the whole story, because of a man who was there and saw the entire disaster unfold in front of him and told his story as well. And I want you to see that. We're going to have to interrupt this with a break, or maybe not. I may just let it roll. As a matter of fact, I will. I want you to watch every minute of this. It starts off with some basic information about the sniper himself. But then he starts telling the story. You've got to watch this.
Good morning, Chairman, Ranking Member Meeks, and members of Congress. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you all about my Marine Corps Scout Sniper Team's experience during the evacuation in Kabul, Afghanistan. This is my perspective. This is my account and not the DOD's. I'm Sergeant Tyler Justin Vargas Andrews. I'm 25 years old and from Northern California, a professionally instructed gunman and radio operator for my team. My sniper team was Reaper 2, part of Victor 2-1 Weapons Company, attached to Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines from Camp Pendleton, California. In June of 2021, after having just left Kuwait, we were deployed to Saudi Arabia as a show of force. We practiced a few small-scale non-combatant evacuation operations in the event we were needed in Afghanistan. August came, and 2 weeks later, we left for Kabul. Reaper 2 and Echo Company had a close relationship with the colonel of the Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force. He kept us informed of the situation on the ground in Afghanistan, and we were ready to go, so we thought. An infantry platoon of roughly 40 Marines and my assistant team leader left for Kabul on August 15th. They eventually faced the Afghan civilian crowd that overran the Hamid Karzai International Airport. The rest of us arrived on August 16th. All the Marines linked up and staged inside a gym in HKIA, not far from the airfield. We connected with our command and received our first mission later that night. From August 17th to the 18th, we surveilled and reported on Taliban activity from the top platform of satellite tower near the civilian airport terminals in HKIA. We reconnected with another sniper team and moved back towards our staging area that night. Our team traveled to Abbey Gate Forward in the afternoon of the 19th and set up a position in the tower as Marines in riot gear were sent through the crowd to cordon off a couple hundred people as we tried to begin some form of processing. Hundreds of people came in waves surging through the gate multiple times, physically fighting us. Living out of our tower, we conducted 24/7 operations at the gate. The next 7 days were surreal. Nothing prepared us for the ground experience we were about to encounter. It was chaos, but we worked together to figure out the next best steps. Tens of thousands of people descended upon Abbey Gate. We were looking for anyone with a blue passport first and foremost. People were suffering from extreme malnutrition, dehydration, heat casualties, and infants were dying. Afghans were brutalized and tortured by the Taliban, flocked to us pleading for help. Some Afghans turned away from HKIA, tried to kill themselves on the razor wire in front of us that we used as a deterrent. They thought this was merciful compared to the Taliban torture that they faced. With only shipping, they thought countless Afghans were murdered by the Taliban 155 yards in front of our position day and night. With only shipping containers between us, the Taliban would routinely murder people under our observation at their checkpoint. We communicated the atrocities to our chain of command and intel assets, but nothing came of it. The troops on the ground had to tirelessly work to control the crowds day and night. Department of State staff in HKIA would completely shut down processing Afghans every evening and into the morning, leaving ground forces with a nightmare. They did not work in reasonable rotations and very much presented an unwillingness to work in other situations as well. No matter our health or condition, the Marines stood watch and engaged in disorderly and dangerous crowds. State was not prepared to be in HKIA. In fact, State would not want to deal with the Afghans unable to be processed, weakening the security of the perimeter. State would take us away from our mission to walk Afghans out to meet the fate of the Taliban, condemning them to death. The Taliban grew in numbers and strengthened their position around HKIA with gun trucks while having occasional visits by Taliban leadership. On August 22nd, an improvised explosive device, IED, probe took place down in the canal running along the perimeter of HKIA. This was ISIS or the Taliban performing an IED test run. We reported this to our chain of command. Days later, we received word to be on the lookout for two vehicle-borne IEDs, described as a gold or white Corolla and a green Mazda convertible. Around 2 a.m. on August 26th, intel guys confirmed the suicide bomber in the vicinity of and nearing Abbey Gate, described as clean-shaven, brown-dressed, black vest, and traveling with an older companion. I asked the intel guys why he wasn't apprehended sooner since we had a full description. I was told the asset could not be compromised. Throughout the entirety of the day on August 26, 2021, we disseminated the suicide bomber information to ground forces at Abbey Gate. He was spotted somewhere from noon to 1 p.m. by myself, then Sergeant Charles Schilling, and another. The anomaly in the crowd, who was clean-shaven and fit the description exactly, traveling with an older gentleman. The individual was consistently and nervously looking up at our position through the crowd. The older of the two wore a black silky hijab that was covering his face most of the time. They both had obvious mannerisms that go along with who we believed him to be. They handed out small cards to the crowd periodically, and the older man sat calmly and seemingly coached the bomber. Over the communication network, we passed that there was a potential threat and an IED attack imminent. This was as serious as it could get. I requested engagement authority while my team leader was ready on the M110 semi-automatic sniper system. The response, leadership did not have the engagement authority for us. Do not engage. I requested for the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whited, to come to the tower to see what we did. While we waited for him, psychological operations individuals came to our tower immediately and confirmed the suspect met the suicide bomber description. He eventually arrived and we showed him our evidence, the photos we had of the two men. We reassured him of the ease of fire on the suicide bomber. Pointedly, we asked him for engagement authority and permission. We asked him if we could shoot. Our battalion commander said, and I quote, "I don't know," end quote. Myself and my team leader asked very harshly, "Well, who does? Because this is your responsibility, sir." He again replied he did not know, but would find out. We received no update and never got our answer. Eventually, the individual disappeared. To this day, we believe he was a suicide bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored. Our expertise was disregarded. No one was held accountable for our safety. About 1730, Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, friend and mentor, came to get me from the tower to go help find an Afghan interpreter in the crowd. We found the interpreter and his brother, born with American passports. They told us of 5 family members still in the canal. I stayed there waiting for the family members standing against a 2-foot canal wall. 10 minutes passed. Then a flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious lying around me. A crowd of hundreds immediately vanished in front of me, and my body was catastrophically wounded with 100 to 150 ball bearings now in it. Almost immediately, we started taking fire from the neighborhood, and I saw how injured I was with my right arm, completely shredded and unusable. I saw my lower abdomen soaked in blood. I crawled backwards roughly 7 feet because I thought I was still in harm's way. My body was overwhelmed from the trauma of the blast. My abdomen had been ripped open. Every inch of my exposed body, except for my face, took ball bearings and shrapnel. I tried to get up, but could not. Laying there for a few minutes, I started to lose consciousness when I heard Chaz, my team leader, screaming my name as he ran to me. His voice calling to me kept me awake. When he got to me, he dragged me to safety and immediately started triaging me, tying tourniquets on my limbs and doing anything he could to stop the bleeding and start plugging wounds with the help of the other Marines. I was awake through most of it, screaming, moaning, and cursing. I ask you to please ask me about getting shot at the tower in Abbey Gate and how no one wanted my report post-blast. Even NCIS and the FBI failed to interview me. Ask me to elaborate on my ordeal post-blast, and ask me about this one little girl and her family that I reunited. Our military members and veterans deserve our best because that is what we give to America. The withdrawal was a catastrophe, in my opinion, and there was an inexcusable lack of accountability and negligence. The 11 Marines, 1 sailor, and 1 soldier that were murdered that day have not been answered for. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
And so the soldier who was there, charged with defending the force as a scout, observer, sniper, had a description, had a target, assessed that this was indeed the suicide bomber, asked for permission to shoot, and did not receive it. There's more. I mean, I played the generals first, and now I'm playing the soldiers. This testimony is from a guy named Lieutenant Colonel David Scott Mann, who is now retired, and it's well, okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wait on that testimony for a moment, because normally when I do videos, they're short. This one was not, and you can see why. So a lot of people are sitting around trying to point fingers or not pointing fingers, or trying to figure out just exactly who's responsible. But the simple case of the matter is that the people that send these people to these places, they are indeed responsible. And some of them, one of them, General McKenzie, plainly said, "I'm responsible for the military decision making." He had subordinates, and there's more to the story. It's easy to point at the military, the people on the ground, and say, by golly, they're just wrong. But that comes from command, who, in my view, perhaps put them there foolishly in the first place, and then did not support them with policy that was required for their safety afterward. More testimony is coming. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 877-512-3895.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right, for about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now.
Call 866-245-6155. That's 866-245-6155. Again, 866-245-6155. 866-245-6155.
Good morning. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. We are covering yesterday's testimony about what happened at Abbey Gate during the withdrawal, the disastrous withdrawal that some people are saying that occurred because of decision-making from the White House, the State Department, and the military. We just listened to the heart-rending story, quite literally heart-rending story. He was hit with shrapnel and ball bearings over every exposed part of his body, losing his arms and other parts of his anatomy. And this is testimony from Lieutenant Colonel David Scott Mann, who was also there. And this is the testimony, in my news judgment and editorial policy, believe you need to see.
I recognize the Lieutenant Colonel Mann for his opening statement.
Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, committee members, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you today. I'm here to relive August 2021 with all of you, not as a Democrat or as a Republican, but as an American combat veteran that's going to do my best to represent over 800,000 Afghanistan war veterans and their families, but with my own point of view. I'm a Green Beret and a retired lieutenant colonel with nearly 23 years in service and 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. I'd like to start with a question. What does an American promise mean today? There's a promise in the military that is both explicit and implicit. I have your back. We were trained that way. It's in our blood. But in August 2021, the leaders who held us to that standard went silent while our Afghan allies were left behind. The U.S. government may not have had the backs of our Afghan allies, but our veterans did. For as long as we've been a nation, our veterans have been a moral compass for doing the right thing, especially in hard times. As we try to figure out where to go from here, I suspect we're going to need that moral compass more than ever. You won't find many veterans sitting out here today who relish being involved in this Afghan evacuation. We paid our dues and we tried to move on with our lives. I know jumping back into the quagmire of Afghanistan was certainly not part of my military retirement plan. But like thousands of other veterans across the country watching Kabul collapse on August 15, 2021, I received a phone call from a friend that absolutely crushed me. "I'm not afraid to die," he said to me. "I just don't want to die alone." Those were the words that dragged me back into the Afghanistan conflict. His name was Sergeant First Class Nezamuddin Nizami, but I just called him Nizam. His father was a Mujahideen fighter who was killed by the Soviets when he was 4 months old. He had no money, no family, no hope. Yet somehow he became an Afghan commando, one of the elite warriors who were trained by U.S. Special Operations to do really 95% of the fighting in the country. Green Berets, including me, who worked with Nizam, we loved him like a brother. He volunteered for every mission every day. He was family. But despite numerous inquiries to the State Department, Congress, and even Army Special Operations headquarters about his SIV status, Kabul was falling and no one was coming to help him. This was a guy who was shot through the face protecting U.S. Green Berets from a Taliban ambush. And for me, he was the same guy that even while he was being hunted and texted by the Taliban would call me to ask how my kids were doing. Over the next few weeks, I assembled a small team of volunteers, mostly veterans from across the country, that we called Task Force Pineapple, to guide Nizam and hundreds more to safety. We didn't have any resources or battlefield access or time, but we had something that a lot of people didn't: relationships and trust. We used cell phones, knowledge of the terrain, and an encrypted chat room to guide at-risk commandos and their families at night, navigating through that suffocating crowd through an open sewage canal, and then into position to link up with known NATO service members like Aiden, who were standing watch near a 4-foot hole in the perimeter fence. Pineapple wasn't the only group. There were hundreds of ad hoc volunteer groups doing similar work, many of them sitting out here today. From breakfast tables to basements across the world. Jane, a Gold Star wife who lost her husband, Chris, in Afghanistan. Will, a double amputee, fighting to save the interpreter who saved his life on the battlefield. And dozens, even hundreds more. We helped hundreds of allies, but thousands were left behind, and at great cost to this vulnerable veteran population who had already given so much. My buddy, Steve, who was racked with post-traumatic stress and a traumatic brain injury from an IED, screamed into his pillow and pounded his bed because his children were in the next room. As his former interpreter was detained at a Taliban checkpoint and was pleading over the phone, "Steve, they are beating my wife. My children are watching this, for God's sakes. What should I do? Can I fight them? Why is this happening?" Jay, a former Navy SEAL in Pineapple, received a text on Signal from his Afghan partner. "My daughter has been trampled, sir. I know we're going to miss our chance to escape, but she's unconscious and barely breathing." It's okay, my friend. Thank you for trying. This whole thing has been a gutting experience. I never imagined I would witness the kind of gross abandonment, followed by career-preserving silence of senior leaders, military and civilian. As a result of the way that we've left Afghanistan, we're on the front end of a national security crisis, as 27 violent extremist groups are now operating on former NATO security bases with Taliban top cover. And I think we're on the front end of a mental health tsunami, as 73% of our Afghan war veterans say they feel betrayed by how this war ended. Calls to the VA hotline have spiked 81% in the first year since the Afghan withdrawal, and they keep coming. My friend Brad was found dead a few months ago in a Mississippi hotel room. His wife Dana confirmed to me that the Afghan abandonment reactivated all the demons that he had managed to put behind him from our time in Afghanistan together. And he just couldn't find his way out of the darkness of that moral injury. America is building a nasty reputation for multi-generational systemic abandonment of our allies that we leave as smoldering human wreckage, from the Montagnards of Vietnam to the Kurds in Syria. Our veterans know something else that this committee might do well to consider. We might be done with Afghanistan, but it's not done with us. The enemy has a vote. If we don't set politics aside and pursue accountability and lessons learned to address this grievous moral injury on our military community and right the wrongs that have been inflicted on our most at-risk Afghan allies, this colossal foreign policy failure will follow us home and ultimately draw us right back into the graveyard of empires where it all started. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
So you can see that. And the applause came right after that testimony. That was from March 8th, but it ties together with yesterday's testimony from soldiers who were there. And so when we talk about this, when we ruminate about all this, and we hear the talking heads and so on discussing what shoulda, coulda, woulda, and they point fingers at each other, and some do, some point at themselves. We need to remember that all this came from far above their pay grade. General Colin Powell is somebody who is, or was, he's gone now, but he was on the forefront of command leadership and leadership in general. And he said that the commander on the ground is always right, and the commander in the rear is always wrong until proven otherwise. What we've seen here in a couple of different pieces of testimony from different dates is a breakdown in that communication chain. The Marine Corps sniper that we heard from, his life is altered forever. But what is also altered was what Lieutenant Colonel David Scott Mann was talking about. The fragile psychology of, I've got your back. Well, do you? Recruiting numbers in the United States military down more than is sustainable. Why? Because of things, in my humble opinion, just like this. Now, you got to keep something in mind here. Anything that I say on this camera, which is opinion, and differentiate between the news camera, which is over here. The opinion that I express here is solely my responsibility. If you've been here for any length of time, you know I'm a Texas State Guardsman. Nothing I say has anything to do with the Texas Military Department, the Texas Adjutant General, the Texas State Guard, Texas State Guard Command. This is just me. We don't have this mission. We are civil affairs troops. We go out and we take care of people in extremis because of natural and man-made disaster. That's what we do. We take care of the people of Texas. Texans serving Texans. But to do that job, you have to have each other's backs. You have to have that support chain. And when that support chain is absent, there is suffering beyond measure, not just among the soldiers suffering it, but the commanders who may have blown the call or been forced to not make a decision based on those above them. Those above them dictate policy that has far-reaching effect, as I just described. And that far-reaching effect now touches our lives. As those mainly responsible for what we saw at Abbey Gate and the withdrawal from Afghanistan cling to truculent silence, trying to avoid the accountability that they are experiencing, whether they choose to admit it or not. The veterans, as Lieutenant Colonel David Mann said, they know what's right and wrong. They've been trained to recognize what's right and wrong. The compact between those soldiers and their command is quite literally drilled into them from the time they begin their military career. And when that breaks down, sometimes it's possible to stop that breakdown. Sometimes it isn't. That's the soldier's chance. But as we've seen just this morning, as we've seen, that breakdown cost people's lives, their entire life, and parts of their bodies that altered their lives, left in that horrifying place called Abbey Gate. Lieutenant Colonel Mann talks about, what does an American promise mean? And as we watch the descent of the United States of America into a nation of politics as opposed to a nation of law, we see that American promise is based on the transitory whims of politics. And yeah, you can gnash your teeth in a political way and say, my gosh, that's not acceptable. That's the least of it. The American promise, if we lose that American promise, it's disastrous. Because that promise suffuses everything. Just enforcement of law. The Department of Justice applying law to all equally. Those are all promises. Those are American promises made to the citizenry. Are they being kept? No, they are not. We have a Supreme Court justice yesterday, the justice of a court whose job is to interpret the Constitution, and just blithely opines that the First Amendment hamstrings the government. Help me understand. Help you understand. The Constitution of the United States is the promise from the government to the people and the promise from the people to the government. That compact between these two groups keeps the American government at bay. It does indeed hamstring that government. And imagine what would happen if those limits were done away with entirely. What is an American promise worth? Returning to the Afghanistan pullout, there were other promises that were made, specifically to our allies. NATO had troops there too. NATO had troops there. Brits, the French, everyone. Everybody in the entire alliance had troops there. We didn't tell them about our pullout. We left them holding the bag. That was horrific. And now we have those very same people, the exact same people, talking about how their political opponent is somehow attacking our long-standing allies and our NATO alliance and all of that. What a terrible human being. Well, okay, how about those you left on the battlefield? Let's take it away from the military. What about the promises made to American citizens in war zones? Did this government pull Americans out of Afghanistan? No. Who did? Veterans did. Combat veterans who knew their way around, formed themselves into groups, traveled halfway around the world again into one of the most godforsaken places on the planet, worked their way through all of the arcane and just plain insane government policies of the Taliban and started evacuating Americans. What was the response from the administration? Why, we don't even know how many are out there. Or if we do know, we're not going to say. Really? You're not going to say? Why? Well, because it might trample on our tenuous hold on power. That's why. Excuse me? Excuse me? You're trying to spin your way out of a mess that cost people's lives? You're trying to spin your way out of the abandonment of American citizens? You're trying to say that the American promise hangs on politics as opposed to character. That's what you're trying to say? And the answer is unequivocally yes. That's exactly what they're trying to say. Moreover, that's what they're doing. So if government promises hinge on politics, they're not promises. They're public relations tools. You can't do that and succeed or even sustain as a nation for any length of time at all, ever. America, the United States of America, is the only nation on the planet without a totalitarian past. And we're going to keep it that way because we, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, can now no longer depend on the promises and assurances, even laws, of the government of the United States. And so those laws, and so those American standards, fall to we the people. We must insist, we must demand, and moreover, we must treat each other with equal justice under the law. We must uphold the American promise. We must do it. Because the people currently in charge of it have no clue whatsoever beyond a narrow, tenuous hold on supposed power, what they're supposed to be doing. The incompetence of the Afghanistan pullout speaks for itself. And as the military is is fond of saying, the S word rolls downhill. And in this case, that S word started in the Oval Office. And it ended at the bottom of a 6-foot grave of 13 American soldiers. And in the hospital bills of those who actually survived the blast. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. My name is John David Wells. What are your thoughts? This country is ours. Whether the people choose to believe it or not, all this political power I'm talking about doesn't belong to the people who think they possess it. It belongs to us. We divvy it out to them as we see fit. But we need to clean up our own understandings of this nation. We don't have to agree, but we at least have to remove hypocrisy and inconsistency and become Americans again, just like these people have been. Back with more in a moment.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 877-512-3895.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now.
Call 866-245-6155. That's 866-245-6155. Again, 866-245-6155. 866-245-6155.
Good morning. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can also find us on our chat room. Our chat room is available to you whenever we're on the air. And we can take a look at that. Let's see. The Texan says, I'll be listening while I'm driving to work. Let's see. Are we saying... Mighty. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay. So, yeah, okay. So there are people saying that they have problems hearing the show. Are you having problems hearing the show? If you are having problems hearing the show, do me a favor and send me a chat. Send me a chat saying you can't hear this, right? I mean, I've got 16, 17 people now that are saying, yeah, I can hear it. I think we're okay. Yvonne says that she can see the show but can't hear it, neither on Facebook or here. And she's on YouTube. I think that's probably a computer thing, but I'm not sure. But if you can hear this, would you please, that was tough to listen to. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, we have sound. Sorry. That's one of the things about a chat room. You actually react to it if you're somebody that cares about what the people believe is happening. We share this broadcast. We just do. While we're on the subject of veterans being let down by their governments, the story was hard to listen to. A crazed man slashed a subway conductor in the neck. A jilted lover shoved his ex-girlfriend in front of a moving car, maiming her. A belligerent shot in the head with his own gun. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul sent in the National Guard and state police to restore order in the New York subways. Before she acted, there were other people that were trying to restore order in the New York subways. More about that in a minute. On Monday afternoon, 2 off-duty NYPD officers riding a commuter train arrested another slashing suspect after he allegedly hacked a rider's face with a box cutter. Video shows one traveler trying to help the victim as others got up and went toward the end of the train car. He sprinted over to the altercation, wrestled with the suspect for much of the 1-minute, 30-second video. Get off of him, bro. He pleaded with him to stop the attack. He ain't done nothing to you. The NYPD said the off-duty officers arrested a 32-year-old man accused of slashing the 27-year-old victim after a verbal altercation. Charges are pending. The reality is if force against riders is used or threatened, and if they choose to defend themselves, there's a likelihood assailants might get hurt, and riders defending themselves are the ones being arrested. This, according to Stephen Razor. He is the partner at Razor and Kenneth, a law firm representing a guy named Daniel Penny. That's a catch-22. Let yourself or someone else be a victim or risk being a defendant in court. The situation goes like this. Lawlessness reigns in the New York subways. Good Samaritans who stand in to stop that slashing, horrifyingly terrible attack are arrested promptly by the police, charged, and now await trial. Daniel Penny is a former United States Marine. He is a veteran. He saw his duty and executed his plan. He was a hero that day, except in the mind of New York DA Alvin Bragg, who charged him with manslaughter. Because the person that he interdicted, stopped from this unbelievably dangerous behavior that he was exhibiting, ended up finding himself in a position where he's sitting in jail because that assailant died. He was immobilizing him while the police, who apparently didn't show up in any kind of quick fashion, were on the way. Now, who do you want riding the subways? Who do you want to ride the subway with? You want to ride with Daniel Penny? Or do you want to ride with crazy people that threaten to maim and injure and sometimes do maim and injure others? What kind of person do you want to see sitting next to you on the 7 train? The answer is you want Daniel Penny there. But Alvin Bragg, who's the DA, says no. And that ties together with something we just said. This American promise. The promise that says a just government will do what is necessary to protect the society it hopes to govern. And these little fiefdoms, Alvin Bragg has a little fiefdom of New York and New York City law. And he guards that fiefdom because he thinks he has power within that small little space on this gigantic planet. And he decides who's innocent and who's guilty. And he decides who's tried and who's not. As a matter of fact, he does it himself. He is the judge. He is all things to all people in New York having to do with New York law enforcement. But he isn't. The man is a horse's ass that's getting his neighbors killed. And charging those people who would try to stop those who would kill their neighbors, he's throwing those in jail. It's time to stop. It's time for the people of New York to realize that there's something more than their politics. Because if they don't, more of this will visit them. That's hour number 1 of the Wells Report. Hour 2 is next.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back, but you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now.
Call 866-245-6155. That's 866-245-6155. Again, 866-245-6155. 866-245-6155.
Nobody wants to get ripped off, broken into, or robbed, but nobody wants to pay a lot of money to have their home protected either. I've got an offer to tell you about to provide home security for your home for less than $1 a day. For real, with no installation or equipment charges. And this is from a company rated #1 by a leading consumer research company. According to the facts, most of you won't even call unless there's a burglary in your neighborhood or something bad happened. So let's give you a reason. Save money. For less than $1 a day with no other costs, you can get your home secured. Plus, get a lifetime equipment replacement warranty. You need protection for your home. Call the Home Security Hotline right now.
Get your home secured for less than $1 a day, and every caller today immediately qualifies for free installation. Call now.
Call 877-275-0973. 877-275-0973. That's 877-275-0973.
Hey, thanks for joining us this morning for the Wells Report, and make sure you share us with all your friends on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, Patreon, and don't forget to check out our Substack column, which will be coming up a little bit later on this afternoon. When you do all this, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you give us those thumbs up. They are really important. Check the notification box so you know when we're on the air, and whatever you do, join us every morning, Monday through Friday, 9 to 11 a.m. Central Time, for the Wells Report.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 877-512-3895.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. By wearing a small device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers right away. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline today and learn about the latest CGM technology. Not only can a CGM immediately reduce pain, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you make better diabetes treatment decisions. And if you have Medicare or private insurance, you can see if you qualify for a CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. We'll also provide free shipping of your new CGM, and we'll bill your insurance company for you. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline to see if you qualify for a CGM at little to no out-of-pocket cost.
North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us on our broadcast. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. And if you notice today, painfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. In short, we de-propagandize the mainstream media. And there's going to be a whole lot of that propagandist effort today as they try to explain what we explained last hour here on the Wells Report. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. I'm working on some things that it's been a heartrending day today. And that heartrending day has started. I was just reporting the news. I was reporting the circumstance having to do with the release of Abbey-gate, the tragedy of Abbey-gate, and what ended up happening with regard to decision making on that day from the very top of the American chain of command through all of the military commands, and finally to the soldiers on the ground who were indeed left out of policy making and decision making that solely, in my view, was inexcusable. That's not the only case of that today. There are other cases, and one of them surrounds a decision made by a federal judge in Illinois. That federal judge saw fit to rule that illegal immigrants into this country, into these United States, they actually were protected by the Second Amendment, and they also had the right to carry weapons in our country. Here's the report from News Nation talking about that very subject.
A judge in Illinois just ruled illegal immigrants have the right to keep and bear arms. So rather than the circle with the line through it, we need like a thumbs up emoji there. The case is pretty simple. Police arrested an illegal immigrant living in Chicago with a gun back in 2020. They charged him for violating the federal law banning illegal immigrants from having guns. Been on the books for a long time. Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman just decided the Second Amendment applies to him, the illegal immigrant, like everybody else, so he can have a gun. In her decision, she wrote that Humberto Flores received and used the handgun solely for self-protection and protection of property during a time of documented civil unrest in the spring of 2020, the summer of love. Court documents show Flores fired the gun at moving cars during the BLM riots in Chicago. He argues police officers warned him about looters who were approaching his neighborhood. Key to this ruling is that the judge says Flores' conduct heavily impacted her decision. He had no criminal record and was not considered a risk to public safety. This case is just one of many challenging that federal statute that prevents illegal immigrants from possessing a firearm.
Yeah, and that is the problem with this entire idea, that indeed now we have illegal immigrants among us that are essentially de facto American citizens. They are de facto American citizens because there is unequal justice under the law. In other words, in Illinois, it's almost impossible for an American citizen to possess a handgun, but an illegal immigrant can, based on the ruling of this judge. Hannity spoke with Senator Marco Rubio yesterday on Fox News. This was his report. Just a moment. Let me do this one more time, and we'll make this happen. I hit the wrong button. Here is the correct button, and here is the report.
By the very nature of their presence in the United States, if you don't respect our laws, borders, and sovereignty, you are here illegally. Okay, you're not a citizen. You don't have constitutional rights like a U.S. citizen, do you?
Well, this is a ruling by an Obama-appointed judge, I believe. And look, what they're trying to do is blur the line between citizenship and everything else, people that are here illegally. And so that you've seen cities, for example, make an effort to allow people that are in this country illegally that aren't even citizens to vote. This is another example in this case. And you almost wonder if it's not being done to sort of mock both gun laws and also a whole understanding of the value of being a citizen of the United States of America. There has to be a distinction between citizenship and non-citizenship, between being legally here and not legally here. If there's no distinction between being here legally or illegally, and there's no distinction between being a citizen or not being a citizen, then what's the point of even having citizenship? What's the point of even having immigration laws? And this is just one more mockery that we're finding in our court system. Luckily, I expect that that this is going to be appealed and overturned at some point because it's an absurd outcome.
Well,
yeah, it is an absurd outcome. But yet we find ourselves living in it. This is going to be overturned. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. A judge sitting on a bench who has apparently no idea of the realities of the Constitution, which is the basis of law in this nation. She has no idea what's going on. So what she does is she says, you know what? If you're here in the United States, gosh, the Second Amendment reigns and you can have a gun too, except that's not the way it is. The way it is if you're not here legally, what are you doing carrying a weapon? The answer is you can't carry a weapon. You can't do it legally, except in Illinois right now, thanks to a federal judge. This is something that Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, one of the senators, stands up and says, well, what's American citizenship worth? That's a question I've asked many times on this broadcast, and I want you to answer it. 817-379-2172. What's American citizenship worth? When you start thinking about what we talked about last hour, which was the American promise, and the fact that the American promise is political and therefore not a promise. This is another one of those circumstances. What are you doing? If you're here illegally, well, okay, so you're essentially flouting American law, just as Hannity said last night on the broadcast. He said, you're flouting American law just to be here. And now you're somehow protected by American law? I'm not talking about human rights here. I'm talking about constitutional rights. The people living here illegally do possess human rights. Do they possess constitutional rights? That's another great question. Do these people have constitutional rights? Do these people have de facto citizenship in the United States? I know they're living here. I know they've been invited to live here by cities and states that say bravely that we're not going to enforce federal law. And where is the redress for that ridiculous political decision? Well, the courts. Well, not in the federal court, the federal district court in Illinois, because that just doesn't apply. And therefore, American citizenship doesn't apply. And that leads to a very practical question. If American citizenship is valueless, why do we pay taxes to a government that considers American citizenship valueless? And of course, that brings up another kettle of fish. There's a real problem here. Because not only is the federal government absolutely saturated with cockamamie politics, not only are we saturated with that, but we're also saturated with political mismanagement of the public treasury. We are $34 trillion in debt. $34 trillion in debt. That is a number that is unsolvable. So thus, we are insolvent. But these are the people that we keep returning to office. These are the people that we have chosen in this republic to represent us in these lawmaking bodies. And these lawmaking bodies, from amongst themselves, create the leadership that goes to the executive branch. The executive branch thus creates the leadership in the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice has decided, just very much like what we were discussing moments ago, this little fiefdom that Alvin Bragg, the DA of New York, seems to think he possesses, to be able to mete out justice as he sees fit based on his politics, it looks like. And all of this is a factor, all of this is a result of irresponsible vote casting. And even those votes are suspect, aren't they? Are our elections rigged? Not only is it not possible to find out if elections are rigged in this nation, anybody who's investigating whether elections are rigged in this nation can find themselves being arrested. There is a lawyer who is currently arrested in jail based on the fact that she tried to find out more about an election in her state. And she was arrested by the FBI. More on that story coming up a little bit later on. Right now, we're still trying to figure out just exactly what's going on with regards to federal law in Illinois. State law in Illinois forbids anybody to have weapons. Federal law says everybody can have weapons. Marco Rubio says, okay, so where does that lead? It leads to the dissolution of American citizenship. There's also something else here. I don't want to hit this one too hard, but there are 400,000 Chinese nationals living in the United States illegally, most of whom are military-aged males. Do they get to carry weapons too? They do in Illinois. And since we've seen federal judges across the land dictate law from the bench as opposed to going through a legislature, blah, 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 that law is the law of the land right now. It's federal judge. Really? Really? And yes, the entire mess will be easily overturned, probably in an emergency fashion, as soon as they can possibly figure out what was going on. But that's not enough. What is enough? That judge needs to be removed from the bench forthwith. She has no idea what she's doing. Well, we have this wonderful idea where we don't want to have a political judiciary. Does this look like a political judiciary to you? So once again, we find ourselves in a position where we must ask this. If judges make political decisions as opposed to legal ones, they must face the electorate. We see this, a non-political electorate, used to circumvent American law, just like we've seen right here. Okay. Well, if you're going to do that, then you need to be beholden to the public. And that means all federal judges must be elected by the people of their states. Doesn't it? And what about this citizenship thing? Does your citizenship mean anything? I don't believe it does. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 512-3895.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. By wearing a small device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers right away. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline today and learn about the latest CGM technology. Not only can a CGM immediately reduce pain, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you make better diabetes treatment decisions. And if you have Medicare or private insurance, you can see if you qualify for a CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. We'll also provide free shipping of your new CGM, and we'll bill your insurance company for you. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline to see if you qualify for a CGM at little to no out-of-pocket cost.
Nobody wants to get ripped off, broken into, or robbed, but nobody wants to pay a lot of money to have their home protected either. I've got an offer to tell you about to provide home security for your home for less than $1 a day. For real, with no installation or equipment charges. And this is from a company rated #1 by a leading consumer research company. According to the facts, most of you won't even call unless there's a burglary in your neighborhood or something bad happened. So let's give you a reason. Save money. For less than $1 a day with no other costs, you can get your home secured. Plus, get a lifetime equipment replacement warranty. You need protection for your home. Call the Home Security Hotline right now.
Get your home secured for less than $1 a day, and every caller today immediately qualifies for free installation. Call now.
Call 877-275-0973. 877-275-0973. That's 877-275-0973.
This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Stephanie Lambert is an attorney in Michigan who has been arrested. She's been arrested for actions taken with Dominion voting systems in her state. We've got that story coming up in just a couple of moments here on the Wells Report. Before we get to that, however, we've been talking a lot about veterans and knowing what to do and what not to do, etc. And indeed, as Lieutenant Colonel David Scott Mann talked about earlier in May 8th testimony before the House Foreign Relations Committee, he said that we're going to have to depend on more of these veterans and the ethos in which they base their service and their patriotism in the future. And he is completely correct. And I'm speaking to you directly to become an American citizen. Stand up for your citizenship. Stand up for equal protection under the law. Stand up for the rightness of America instead of the politics of America. Brian Schwalb, a Democrat Attorney General in Washington, D.C., has dropped charges against Gold Star father Steve Nakui for disrupting Congress during President Biden's State of the Union address. Nakui is the father of Kareem Nakui, who was killed during the Biden administration's chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Fox News learned of the decision yesterday evening. The decision to drop the charges was confirmed by the Speaker's office. The D.C. AG's office told Fox News it has decided not to prosecute in the case, just as they have in cases of protesters in the past. Fox News was told that Nakui was thrilled and humbled and that there were tears when he heard the news from Representative Daryl Issa of California. Other families were with him when he found out the news. Nakui was a guest of Representative Brian Mast of Florida for the speech and interrupted the president, shouting, "Abby Gate." U.S. Capitol Police warned Nakui and then removed him from the chamber and arrested him. USCP put out a statement that night stating that disrupting the Congress and demonstrating in congressional buildings is illegal. Mast, along with Representative Michael Waltz, the Republican from Florida, Representative Issa, and House Foreign Affairs Chief Chairman Michael McCall of Texas, called for the charges to be dropped. Issa and Waltz wrote a letter to USCP Police Chief Tom Manger imploring him to drop the charges, but the decision was eventually left up to the D.C. Attorney General, who dropped the charges. When I start talking to you about standing for the United States, realizing that we, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, must defend that document with our lives and our precious honor, because the country is precious and we should defend it as such. We know what happens in other countries that don't have what we have, and what we have is being taken away from us by narrow politicians and ideas of political mastery of this particular population, we the people. If we don't stand for those first three words in the Constitution, we won't have them. That's the way I see it. It's time for us to act. Do we do so by making ourselves police officers and going arrest? No. That's chaos. We do so with our votes. Forget about all the hash and mixmaster general garbage about politics this and political issue that and blah, 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 blah. Look at what this government is doing to our Constitution and this nation, and determine whether or not you want more of that or less of that. Stop playing politics and start playing American. I think you'll find it a much more satisfying pursuit. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment.
Nobody wants to get ripped off, broken into, or robbed, but nobody wants to pay a lot of money to have their home protected either. I've got an offer to tell you about to provide home security for your home for less than $1 a day. For real, with no installation or equipment charges. And this is from a company rated #1 by a leading consumer research company. According to the facts, most of you won't even call unless there's a burglary in your neighborhood or something bad happened. So let's give you a reason. Save money. For less than $1 a day with no other costs, you can get your home secured. Plus, get a lifetime equipment replacement warranty. You need protection for your home. Call the Home Security Hotline right now.
Get your home secured for less than $1 a day, and every caller today immediately qualifies for free installation. Call now.
Call 877-275-0973. 877-275-0973. That's 877-275-0973.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. By wearing a small device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers right away. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline today and learn about the latest CGM technology. Not only can a CGM immediately reduce pain, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you make better diabetes treatment decisions. And if you have Medicare or private insurance, you can see if you qualify for a CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. We'll also provide free shipping of your new CGM, and we'll bill your insurance company for you. If you use insulin daily, you might be eligible to get your own continuous glucose monitor. So call the US Med Diabetic Health Hotline to see if you qualify for a CGM at little to no out-of-pocket cost. How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right, for about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back, but you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now.
Call 866-245-6155. That's 866-245-6155. Again, 866-245-6155. 866-245-6155.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 877-512-3895.
News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Hello. Thanks for joining us. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can join us on the chat room if you'd like. There are people that are trying to do the right thing. And those people trying to do the right thing face a very difficult road. In fact, it can involve jail time. It can involve arrest. It can involve a really bad day. We call those people whistleblowers, and they are marginalized in one way, shape, or form or another. And this is the case of Stephanie Lambert. Stephanie Lambert is an attorney. She is facing criminal charges. She was arrested by U.S. Marshals after hearing over possible sanctions against her for what? Disseminating confidential emails from Dominion voting systems, the target of conspiracy theories regarding President Donald Trump's 2020 election loss. This being reported by the New York Post. A Michigan judge earlier this month issued a bench warrant for Lambert after she missed a hearing in her case in which she's charged with 4 felonies for accessing voting machines in a search for evidence of a conspiracy against Donald Trump. Lambert had earlier unsuccessfully sued to overturn Trump's loss in Michigan. Earlier on Monday, Lambert acknowledged the passing on of the records from Dominion Voting Systems to law enforcement. She then attached an affidavit that included some of the leaked emails and was signed by Dar Leaf. Dar is a county sheriff in northern Michigan who has investigated false claims of widespread election fraud from the 2020 election. She put that in a filing in her own case in Michigan. The rest of the documents were posted to an account under Leaf's name on X. Leaf did not respond to requests for comments. Lambert's attorney, Daniel Hartman, has not immediately responded to requests for comment. Byrne wrote in a text that he did not know if Lambert had been arrested, but if she was, I respect her even more, and she can raise her rate to me. Lambert contended the Dominion documents obtained under discovery were evidence of crimes and needed to be disclosed. Byrne wrote on X that Lambert signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, but she found evidence of ongoing crime, reported it to law enforcement. If she found a severed head in a discovery box, she had a duty to report it to law enforcement too. Dominion, on Friday, filed a motion demanding that Lambert be removed from the Byrne case for violating a protective order that U.S. District Judge Maxila A. Upadhyaya had put on the documents in the case. It said Lambert's disclosure had triggered a new round of threats toward the company, which has been at the center of elaborate conspiracy theories about Trump's loss. Again, this is being reported by the New York the New York Post. These actions should shock the conscience, said Dominion, writing in its motion, seeking to disqualify Lambert. They reflect a total disregard for this court's orders, to say nothing of the safety of Dominion employees. Upadhyaya, during a hearing on Monday, said she had scheduled a subsequent one to determine whether sanctions against Lambert or removing her from the case were appropriate. Dominion filed several defamation lawsuits against those who spread conspiracy theories, blaming its election equipment for Trump's 2020 loss. Fox News settled the most prominent of these cases for $787 million last year. Dominion's lawsuit against Byrne is one of the several the company filed against prominent election deniers, including MyPillow founder Mike Lindell. That, by the way, is reasonably straightforward journalism. The CNN version of the story continues with something that leads to a Shakespearean quote, "Methinks she dost protest too much." I've said this time and time again. You don't have to sell the truth. The truth stands on its own. It is obvious. Truth is something that is obvious. Well, okay, that's the truth. We get it. It makes itself apparent. But a lie is something that you have to very carefully maintain. You have to constantly reinforce that there's a lie being told. But in that reinforcement comes the suspicion that maybe the reinforcement is a lie in unto itself. And that's where this is going for me. That's where it's been going for me. As I saw the monolithic leftist media response against even investigations into whether or not there was handsy-footsy with regards to the 2020 election. I'm not an election denier. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a newsman. I do make comment. My comment is, my God, Dominion is it is not. My God, Dominion is a terrible company that has fraudulent voting machines. My comment is, there have been questions regarding Dominion voting machines. Don't you think we ought to check them out? And that just can't be done. Well, there's nothing to see. What do you mean there's nothing to see? How do we know if we don't check? Well, because you're a conspiracy theorist, it's ridiculous. My God, this Stephanie Lambert you're talking about, she's a pro-Trump attorney. Is she a pro-Trump attorney or is she a pro-law attorney? Is she a pro-Constitution attorney? But because she supports Donald Trump, well, obviously, she is politically biased. Really? Since when does political bias have anything to do with a disqualifier for American law? I love the idea that this judge is going to try to do what she plans to do, which is being removed from former Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne. That was the Byrne I was referring to in the reporting. He's being sued for defamation by Dominion over his 2020 election lies. As part of the case, okay, he's a CEO. His election lies, he's being prosecuted over election lies. Really? No kidding. What about the First Amendment? Is that anywhere prevalent here? Yeah. As a part of the case, they have access to discovery from Dominion, whose lawyers said they have already turned over more than 1 million documents. Well, if they turned them all over to the public record, then what's the big deal with Stephanie Lambert releasing some of them? What's wrong with that? Why is she being arrested? There are whole bunches of problems with this. But the willingness to sell this over and over and over again, we don't believe there was ever a problem with the 2020 election. And in fact, those people that are saying that there were problems with the 2020 election, they are nothing more than tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. They are pro-Trumpians. And we're not even going to bother to dignify their charges by actually investigating whether or not there's a problem. That's fascism. Pure and simple. That is setting aside American law for politics. You know, when all this came down in the 2020 election, I suggested that Joe Biden should stand up and say, okay, so the 2020 election results are in. Those election results show me as the winner. But there are too many Americans with too many questions about the veracity of that election, so let's look it over. Let's find out. And from the bully pulpit, President Biden should say, or President-elect Biden at that point, should stand up and say, let's make sure that this is right. But he didn't, did he? Why? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? Especially considering his inauguration speech about being the president for all the people and trying to call for unity in these United States. Why wouldn't he do that? Well, because he might have lost the election. That's why he didn't do it. I mean, I don't know that could have been possible. I mean, the very same people that were celebrating the election of Joe Biden were saying, you know, voter fraud is such a small problem. There's not enough voter fraud to actually sway an American election. And by the way, if that's the case, and Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, then why wouldn't you want to look at the election to make sure? And why is Dominion working so hard to stomp on people who disagree that their assessment of their machines is wrong? Why are they doing that? All of these investigations could lead to Dominion not having any problem whatsoever. Every single one of these election investigations could lead to the fact that indeed Joe Biden won the election. And indeed, just because every other president has essentially been elected with somewhere around 65 million votes, that Joe Biden is such an amazing political powerhouse. He got 81 million. And so I look at all this and I go, okay. So let's go to just exactly how CNN has reported this story. I want you to note the exquisite bias in this copy. Check this out. This is CNN reporting the same story that I just reported through the auspices of the New York Post. A pro-Trump lawyer who tried to overturn the 2020 election was arrested Monday after a court hearing about her recent leak of internal emails belonging to Dominion Voting Systems. There was an existing arrest warrant from the attorney, Stephanie Lambert, stemming from her failure to appear at a recent court hearing and in her separate criminal case in Michigan, where she was charged with conspiring to seize voting machines after the 2020 election. Lambert and a cadre of election deniers, that's 3, have disrupted one of Dominion's many ongoing defamation suits by publicly leaking thousands of the company's internal emails in recent days, using the disclosures to resurrect false claims about voter fraud. That's 4. We've got 3 paragraphs and 4 statements that are biased in this news reporting. The controversy erupted when Lambert provided the confidential Dominion documents to Barry County Sheriff Dar Leaf, who has embraced conspiracy theories about the 2020 election and has used his office to hunt for supposed voter fraud against Donald Trump. In the last 24 hours, Leaf has posted more than 2,000 internal Dominion documents on his social media account. So why is everybody so upset about releasing these documents? I mean, the judge was going to make them public anyway, wasn't he? Maybe not. Maybe he was going to make these documents. Maybe he was going to make these documents public. So why is Dominion so upset? If they've done nothing wrong, what's the problem? Well, just because they haven't done anything wrong doesn't mean they don't have rights, Wells, right? Except Dominion is a corporation. And that means that the public can access the corporation to give money to it, and that money has to be accounted for legally. And so that's public information from the corporate office. Now, Dominion shrouds itself in, whoa, hold on. These are trade secrets. Really? Trade secrets? What trade are you plying? What trade are you actually plying? Are you plying honest voting systems, or are you plying politics? Why would you be upset if these internal documents are thus released to the public? And why would all of these judges and lawyers that are trying to chase down Stephanie Lambert be upset with the release of these documents? Why? These are questions. These are the questions I have about the 2020 election. I don't say that it was a bogus election. I just have questions about it. Will I be the next one arrested for asking these questions? Now, Stephanie Lambert is arguably a whistleblower. Why hasn't she been given those protections? Because we got to stomp on this story hard and fast, and we have to stomp on the people telling it hard and fast. These are the questions that have to be answered for the sake of the nation. We need to put the 2020 election behind us. And until the questions that I just posed are asked, not because I posed them, they've been asked by other people too, until those questions are answered, there are going to be people who do not toe the party line. Why don't they toe the party line? Well, because it looks like it's a party line. What if they're not a part of the party? Oh my. These are the issues that confront us as we go to 2024. Is that the way we want to do our elections? Is this the way we want to do that? I dare say no. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in a moment.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
Call 877-512-3895. That's 877-512-3895. 877-512-3895.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right, for about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back, but you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now.
Call 866-245-6155. That's 866-245-6155. Again, 866-245-6155. 866-245-6155.
This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of the land voted 6-3 to allow Texas to begin enforcing SB 4. That is a law that gives police in Texas broad powers to arrest migrants suspected of crossing the border illegally as the legal battle over the measure plays out. And there was much rejoicing. Well, until a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decided that, we're going to keep that law on hold. And they did that because they have arguments before the court today. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be an en banc argument or not, but the Supreme Court of the United States deferred back to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, who immediately decided to stay the order one more time. Now, that in itself is part and parcel of this particular food fight over the southern border of Texas with Mexico. And, of course, by implication, the southern border of the United States with Mexico. The Associated Press has issued this particular story on this particular decision. I want you to listen to see if you hear any bias. A federal appeals court late Tuesday issued an order that again prevents Texas from arresting migrants suspected of entering the U.S. illegally, hours after the Supreme Court allowed the strict new immigration law to take effect. So far, so good. The decision by the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals comes weeks after a panel on the same court cleared the way for Texas to enforce the law by putting a pause on a lower judge's injunction. Again, AP's doing fine here journalistically. But by a 2-1 order, a panel of the appeals court, the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, lifted that pause ahead of the arguments before the court today. Texas authorities have not announced any arrests made under the law. Earlier, a divided Supreme Court, there's a little bit of bias, allowed Texas to begin enforcing the law that gives police broad powers to arrest migrants suspected of crossing the border illegally as the legal battle plays out. Here we go again. The conservative majority order rejected an emergency application from the Biden administration, which says the law is a clear violation of federal authority that would cause chaos in immigration law. Texas Governor Greg Abbott praised the order, clearing the way for the law that allows any police officer in Texas to arrest migrants, illegals, for entry into the United States, authorizes judges to order them to leave. In other words, go back home. The High Court did not address whether the law is constitutional. The measure was sent to the appellate court, which made yesterday's ruling. It's unclear where any migrants ordered to leave might go if the law is ultimately allowed. It calls for them to be sent to ports of entry along the U.S.-Mexico border, even if they're not Mexican citizens. But the Mexico government said yesterday it would not, quote, under any circumstances, accept the return of any migrants to its territory from the state of Texas, unquote. Oh, really? Really? And of course, what does that point out? That points out that the United States government and the Mexican government are working together to flood the United States with illegal migrants. And they're working together. And indeed, if this uppity Texas wants to send them back to us, we're just not going to take them. Oh, really? Okay. Well, we have ports of entry into Texas. If you're not going to take them, you're not crossing the ports of entry. Now, that would be immediately overturned by the Biden administration, the DOJ, and so on and so on. But that would be the next move I would make. If I were Governor Greg Abbott, I'd close the ports of entry. And maybe not at the ports of entry. What I'd do is I'd put roadblocks up 5 miles away from the ports of entry, not allowing anybody to pass. If I was Governor Greg Abbott. And that's what I would do. And they would stay there. They would stay there. To all incoming traffic from Mexico, they would stay there. Unless, of course, they could prove their American citizenship, then I'd let them go. But I put a checkpoint immediately behind the port of entry. And I would not I'd turn around any Mexican national. You have to go back because we're not going to allow you into the country. Like I said, it would be overturned immediately. But it's time to take the gloves off when it comes to the United States federal government not enforcing the border. It's time to take the gloves off. And I live in Texas. And Texans do that kind of we do that kind of stuff. Because we've had enough. A nation without a border is not a nation. And now we've got judges in Illinois allowing illegal migrants to carry weapons in these United States because of the Second Amendment. Oh, you'll get run through the mill if you want to actually purchase a weapon in Illinois. You'll have to disassemble it. You'll have to have half the parts of one pistol in one room and half the parts of the pistol in the other room. And you'll have to have the ammunition for the pistol in yet another room, all under lock and key. But an illegal migrant can just walk around with a gun and shoot indiscriminately into cars passing by because the police said there might be looters out. By the way, that's not a joke. Okay, the parts about spreading the gun parts all over your house, that's a joke. And having all of them under lock and key in different rooms, yeah, that's a joke. But what isn't a joke is that a judge just did that. Like I said, time for the people of Texas and the people of the United States to start standing for the Constitution of the United States, even though it doesn't seem like the government wants to. Well, we want to. And I'm not talking about insurrection of any kind. I'm not talking about riots. I'm talking about being Americans. Let's do that, shall we? This is the Wells Report. And thank you very much for being with us. I sincerely appreciate it. That's awfully nice. Let me look at what Mugwump has put forth on the chat room. Let's see. In a civil suit, both sides are required to exchange evidence that might be relevant at trial. But in the Dominion case, as in most, all the attorneys involved, including Lambert, signed a protective order not to share the material in any way unless the judge agrees it should be public. Okay, so basically what Lambert did was she just ran over the judge in a civil case. Okay, I get it. Let's see, a journalist and commentator. Yes, Rick, I am a commentator, not to be confused with a russet potato or a sweet potato. Defamation occurs if you make a false statement of fact about somebody else that harms that person's reputation. Such speech is not protected by the First Amendment and could result in criminal and civil liability. That's true. But we're not talking about a person. We're talking about a corporation. And while we're on the subject of illegal immigrants having constitutional rights, do concocted legal corporations have constitutional rights too? Really? If they have if corporations in the United States have constitutional rights, then why don't they follow the Constitution? Ooh, maybe another topic for another day. Mug, thanks very much for your input. I appreciate your thoughts. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. All right, that's all I got. I'm going to get out of here. I got some work to do. So until tomorrow, by all means, keep tuning into the Wells Report. Sorry it was so somber today, but that sniper's testimony just got to me. And I was actually proud of myself because I didn't weep in the middle of the reporting of it. That was hard to hear. This is a tough show to do. So God bless you and yours. Be safe. Make good